Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're back once again with another amazing science tutorial video. I'm Coach Spivey, joined with my son,
Jordan Spivey.
And if you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on more of our amazing science videos. And also check us out at our website at
www.botherscientinterfaces.com.
so you don't miss out on even more of our science content and materials. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on our video for today. And we're going to be looking at cellular respiration 101. So let's do this. Aerobic cellular respiration is the process that releases energy from food in the presence of oxygen. And it starts off with two reactants, which are glucose or sugar from the food that we eat, and oxygen. And then the three products that are produced are carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And it's important to know that carbon dioxide and water are actually the waste products, while energy is made in the form of ATP, and ATP is what's used to help fuel our daily lives. A brief overview of our important workers for cellular respiration. And we'll start off with acetyl-CoA. And it's a molecule whose main function is to deliver the acetyl group to the Krebs or the citric acid cycle. And then followed by ADP, which is short for adenosine diphosphate, and it's made of adenosine and two phosphates, and is used to make ATP by adding another phosphate group to store and release energy for cells. And then we have ATP, which is short for adenosine triphosphate, and it's made of adenosine and three phosphates used by cells to store and release energy. And I always like to use the analogy that ADP is like a partially charged battery, while ATP is a fully charged battery. And the way it works is, remember, ADP only has two phosphates, but then when we add this additional phosphate to ADP, it turns into ATP or adenosine triphosphate, which means now we have those three phosphates, and this is a fully charged battery ready to be used for energy consumption. And now moving on to NAD+, and it accepts electrons. And when it transports an electron, it becomes NADH. And moving on to NADH, it's the reduced form of NAD+, and it's used to transport electrons to the mitochondria. And then finally, we have FADH2, and it's an electron carrier used to transport electrons to the Electron Transport Chain. Moving into the process of aerobic cellular respiration, and it occurs in three steps. And in step one, we have glycolysis, which the end result of it, we have two ATP that are produced. Then we move on to step two, which is Krebs Cycle, or also known as the citric acid cycle. And it produces two ATP, and this is where carbon dioxide is released as well. And then step three is the Electron Transport Chain. And this is where the most amount of ATP that are produced. So you usually have 32 to 34 ATP produced at this part of the process. And I like to remember it by saying GKE, which stands for glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. So overall, the process of aerobic cellular respiration produces approximately 36 ATP. Now let's move on to step one of aerobic cellular respiration, and that's glycolysis. And it's the breakdown of glucose by enzymes releasing energy and pyruvic acid. And glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm. So we'll be looking at this first step right here, and we'll be going in detail by looking at this diagram below. So now, the first step of glycolysis is two ATP molecules are invested to start the process of breaking glucose down. So here's that glucose molecule right here that comes from the food we eat, and here are those two ATP that are used to start the process of breaking this glucose molecule down. And then in step two, we have enzymes. They break down glucose into two molecules of pyruvic acid. So we continue following this glucose molecule down, and I'll go ahead and put enzymes over here so you know that these are what are used to break down the glucose molecule. So we follow this molecule all the way down, is actually converted or changed into two pyruvic acid molecules right here. And then if we look in step three, we have two ATP and two pyruvic acid molecules are produced from each glucose molecule, and they head into the Krebs cycle. So if you notice right here, it says 4 ATP, but remember, we invested 2 ATP, so we have a net total of 2 ATP that actually move on into the Krebs cycle along with these two pyruvic acid molecules for step three. And now on to step 2 of aerobic cellular respiration, which is the Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle. And this is where pyruvic acid is broken down to make carbon dioxide, NADH, ATP, and FADH2. And it cycles twice, once for each pyruvic acid produced from glycolysis. Remember, you had 2 pyruvic acids produced from glycolysis right here. And then the Krebs cycle actually occurs in the mitochondria. So first in the Krebs cycle, pyruvic acid from glycolysis reacts to form acetyl-CoA. So here's that pyruvic acid right here, and it reacts to form acetyl-CoA right here. So that's the first step of the Krebs cycle. So in the second step of the Krebs cycle, carbon dioxide is produced from the reaction and 2 high energy electrons are passed to NAD+ to produce NADH. So let's take a look at that. Here's that carbon dioxide that is produced from that reaction, and then here's that NAD+ that's actually turned into NADH when it carries those high energy electrons. And that's the second step of the Krebs cycle. In the third step of the Krebs cycle, acetyl-CoA combines with a 4-carbon compound in the cycle to produce citric acid. So let's take a look at that. So here's acetyl-CoA, and it combines with that 4-carbon compound to produce this citric acid right here. And that's our third step of the Krebs cycle. Fourth step of the Krebs cycle, citric acid is broken down into a 5-carbon compound and then into a 4-carbon compound, releasing 2 carbon dioxide during this process, and then the cycle starts over again. So let's take a look at that. So here's that citric acid right here, and it's broken down into this 5-carbon compound right here, and then into this 4-carbon compound right here, and then it releases 2 carbon dioxide. So here's that first carbon dioxide followed by a second carbon dioxide, and this is what occurs in step 4 of our Krebs cycle. In step 5 of the Krebs cycle, the breaking and rearranging of carbon bonds is captured in the forms of ATP, NADH, and FADH2 to go into the electron transport chain. So here's the ATP right here, and here's the NADH, and then here's the FADH2, and all 3 of these are going to be going into the electron transport chain. That's the 5th and final step of the Krebs cycle. To the final step of aerobic cellular respiration, which is step 3, the electron transport chain. And it uses the high energy electrons from glycolysis and the Krebs cycle to convert ADP into ATP, and it occurs in the inner membrane layer of the mitochondria. A brief review, we've discussed glycolysis where 2 ATP are formed, and then we moved into the Krebs cycle where another 2 ATP are formed. And so now we have 4 ATP that are going to the electron transport chain where 32 ATP are formed. So it starts off first by NADH and FADH2 passing high energy electrons from carrier to carrier down the electron transport chain. So if you take a look right here, here's NADH and here's FADH2, and they're passing these high energy electrons down this electron transport chain. And then in step 2, oxygen accepts the electrons also with hydrogen ions, which forms water. So I go ahead and put step 1 right here, and then here's that step 2 right here, and here's that water that is formed. And then in step 3, energy is generated by the electron transport chain to move hydrogen ions across the inner mitochondrial membrane into the intermembrane space. So if you take a look, here's the inner mitochondrial membrane, and here's the inner membrane space. So I go ahead and check both of those. And if you notice, here are those hydrogen ions that are being pumped across this inner mitochondrial membrane into this inner membrane space. So here's that step 3. And then in step 4, we have hydrogen ions pass back across the mitochondrial membrane through ATP synthase, which causes the base of the synthase molecule to rotate. With each rotation, which is caused by the movement of an hydrogen ion, ATP synthase produces ATP from ADP. So let's go ahead and take a look at step 4 right here. So I go ahead and write that and circle that. So this molecule right here, so this right here is ATP synthase. And if you notice, these hydrogen ions are being pumped back across ATP synthase. And with each hydrogen ions that is pumped across, it causes one complete turn of ATP synthase, which turns this ADP into ATP. And that's how we get those 32 ATP in the electron transport chain. Now you're going to use your knowledge of the process of aerobic cellular respiration to fill in the following concept map. And since I love this topic so much, I'll go ahead and start with the first two. So aerobic cellular respiration begins with glucose, which is the energy we get from food, which is broken down during glycolysis. So now, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and take about 3 minutes or so to complete the following concept map, and also you can use this word bank on the side to help you out. So go ahead and pause the video now. Once again, it's time for your check for understanding, and you're going to use your notes and knowledge of aerobic cellular respiration to answer the following. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Coach Spivey, sign off my son Jordan Spivey, and remember, if you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also check us out at our website at www.fatherssoninnovations.com. And like I always say, make sure you have a wonderful, awesome, positive day. Peace.